Welcome to MTG Daily. Today, I'll be teaching you how to play Magic the Gathering. If you're brand new, don't worry. I'll walk you through the basics so you can sit down and play your first game with confidence. Before we talk rules or strategy, let's start simple. What does the game actually look like on the table? Magic has a few zones every player uses, and once you know where they are, the rest makes a lot more sense. Starting off first, we have our playmat. This is where all of our cards go. Right? This is going to be the field where we put our lands, our spells, our life total, everything. This is where all the magic happens. First off, we have your deck, also called your library. It goes on the top right side of your play area. This is where you would draw your cards from. Next, we have your graveyard, which is right below your library. This is where your cards go when they're used, destroyed, or discarded. Think of it as your discard pile. On the opposite side of your board, you have your life total. Your life total is tracked with either dice, pen and paper, or an app. Usually it's kept visible right near your battlefield, and in most formats you'll start with 20 life, but in Commander it's 40. Right below your life total, you'll have your exile zone. This is similar to your graveyard, but think of it more of those cards are removed from the game entirely unless something specifically brings them back. Now pushing into the middle area, we'll have at the top there is going to be our battlefield. This is where creatures, artifacts, and enchantments go once they're played. This is the main stage where the action happens. Next up, we have your land zone. This is for your lands, which produce mana. Usually they sit in a row right below your battlefield, closer to you. Players often group them together by color so you can see what resources you have available. Next up, we have your hand. This is kept off the table and hidden. This is where only you can see these cards. In every game, you'll start with 7 cards. And if you're playing Commander, you'll also have a command zone where your legendary commander sits, ready to be cast. Usually it's held right around the area next to the life total. Now that you have the layout of the board down, let's look at the most important part of the game, the cards themselves. Here's the anatomy of a card. Every card shares the same basic parts. Starting from the top down, we have the name. This is the card's name that goes right across the top, easy to read. Right next to the name, we have the mana cost. This tells you how much mana you need to play it. The colored symbols match the lands you'll need. Moving down a little bit, we have the type line. Right in the middle, this line tells you what kind of card it is. Creature, instant, sorcery, land, artifact, enchantment, or planeswalker. Moving down a little bit more, we have your rules text. This explains exactly what the card does. If you can read this box, you can play Magic. For creatures, the bottom right shows their strength. Power is how much damage they deal. Toughness is how much damage they can take. Okay, now we know how to read the cards and where to put them, but it's just as important to understand the different types of cards you'll play. Each one has a unique role in the game. And first up, we have our lands. Lands are your resources, and you normally get to play 1 land per turn, unless another card specifically lets you play more. Each land makes 1 mana of its color. Forests make green, islands make blue, swamps make black, mountains make red, and plains makes white. Later, when you want to use that mana, you'll usually turn the land sideways. That's called tapping, to show that it's already been used for this turn. Next up, let's talk about our creatures. Creatures are your army. You cast them using mana, and once they're on the battlefield, they can attack your opponents or block their creatures. Every creature has 2 numbers in the bottom right. The first number is its power, how much damage it deals. The second number is its toughness, how much damage it can take before it dies. When a creature takes damage equal to or greater than its toughness in a single turn, it goes to the graveyard. Quick note on creatures is most creatures can't attack the turn that they entered the battlefield. That's called summoning sickness, unless they have an ability like haste. Now that we've seen where cards go and the basics of lands and creatures, let's talk about how a turn actually works. Every turn in Magic follows the same structure, called phases. Once you know the phase, the rest of the game clicks into place. During your turn, you will have 7 phases of your turn. It goes from untap, upkeep, draw, main phase, combat phase, second main phase, and your end step. Untap is first, when you ready your cards by turning everything back upright from the previous turn. Upkeep, some cards say at the beginning of your upkeep. This is when those effects happen. Draw, You draw one card from your library into your hand. Main phase. This is when you can play a land, cast creatures, sorceries, enchantments, or artifacts. Combat phase. Combat has its own steps, but the basics are: declare your attackers, your opponent declares their blockers, and then damage is dealt using power and toughness. Then it goes to your second main phase. After combat, you get another main phase. You can play another land if you haven't yet, or cast more spells. Then it moves to your end step. This is the end of your turn. Anything that says until end of turn goes away, any sort of triggers that say at your end step trigger, and then your opponent starts their turn right after. Knowing the phases matters, because some cards, like sorceries, can only be played during your main phase, while can be played at almost any time. And that brings me into the next type of cards I'm going to go over, instants and sorceries. Not every card stays on the battlefield. Some spells are a one-time effect. Once they resolve, they go straight to the graveyard. Sorcery spells are spells you can only cast on your turn, during your main phase when the stack is empty. Think of them as big moves you can make once you've got the chance. Instants can be cast at almost any time on your turn, during combat, or even on an opponent's turn. These are tricks and responses. Easiest way to remember is sorceries are only on your turn and instants equals anytime. Next up on the card types, we have artifacts. Artifacts are magical objects or machines. They usually stay on the battlefield and keep working until someone removes them. Some artifacts are creatures called artifact creatures, and those work just like normal creatures except they're also artifacts. Next up, we have enchantments. Enchantments are lasting magical effects. They stay on the battlefield and change how the game plays. Some enchantments affect everything, like giving all your creatures a bonus ability, or others are called auras. Those attach to a creature, land, or other permanent and give it new abilities. Last up on the card type, we have Planeswalkers. Planeswalkers are some of the most powerful cards in Magic. Think of them like allies who join the fight with their own set of abilities. Each Planeswalker enters the battlefield with a number of loyalty counters. They have the abilities you can use once per turn by adding or removing loyalty counters. When their loyalty counters hit 0, they're put into the graveyard. Unlike most cards, Planeswalkers can be attacked directly, just like a player. The next card type only applies to Commander. In Commander, you'll always start with a Commander, a legendary creature, or sometimes a Planeswalker, if it specifically says it can be a Commander. Your Commander begins in the command zone. You can cast it just like any other creature, but if it leaves the battlefield, you can choose to send it back to the command zone instead of the graveyard. Each time you cast your Commander again, it will cost 2 extra mana to cast on top of its mana cost. Quick note about Commander though, is Commander also has a unique rule called Commander Damage. If one Commander deals 21 combat damage to you, you lose, no matter your life total. Okay, we've covered the basics, the board, the cards, and the phases. Now let's see how this actually plays out in a game. Let's put it into a scenario. It's my main phase and I cast Land of War Elves. Now, my opponent says they want to cast Shock to kill it. But wait, can they do that right now? Or do they have to wait until it's on the battlefield? And if I cast a spell after that, whose effects happens first? That's when the stack comes into play. The stack is Magic's system for deciding what happens and in what order whenever players start casting spells or activating abilities. Priority is like a talking stick in Magic. Only the player holding it is allowed to take an action. This is how it works. When you cast a spell or activate an ability, you keep the talking stick first. When you're done with that activation or cast, the stick passes to the next player in turn order. They can either do something or pass it along. Once everyone passes the talking stick in a row, the top spell or ability on the stack resolves. So if I cast Land of War Elves, I've got the talking stick. I can respond again if I want, but when I pass it, my opponent gets the stick. If they do nothing and pass it back, the Elves resolves. Alright, so what happens to all the spells and abilities people play while the talking stick is going around? That's where the stack comes in. Think of the stack like a pile of actions waiting to happen. Every time someone casts a spell or an ability activates, it goes on top of the pile. When everyone passes the talking stick, or priority, the top thing on the pile resolves first. then the next down, and then the next until the pile is empty for that resolution. A key rule for understanding the stack is it's always last in, first out. The newest spell or ability resolves before the older ones. So, for example, if I cast a creature and my opponent responds with Shock, the Shock goes on top of the stack. Since it's last in, Shock resolves first and deals damage to whatever creature is on the field. Then, if the creature spell is still legal and still resolves, it will resolve then. So, that's the stack. The system that makes sure Magic doesn't devolve into chaos when players act at the same time. Now that we've got to know how the timing works of things, let's go over the most common abilities you'll see on cards and how they fit into all this. Abilities are extra rules written on cards that change how they work. Some are simple, like flying, while others can completely change how combat or spells play out. While there's almost a full dictionary worth of abilities in Magic, we're going to cover the most basic and common ones you'll see. Abilities come in three main flavors: static, triggered, and activated. Every keyword or special rule you see on a card falls into one of these buckets. Static abilities. These are always on as long as the card is on the battlefield. For example, flying, death touch, or indestructible. If a creature has flying, it always has flying. You don't have to activate anything. Triggered abilities. These happen when something specific occurs. You can spot them because they start with words like when or whenever. An example could be when Elvish Visionary enters the battlefield, draw a card. As soon as the trigger happens, the ability goes onto the stack. The last type of abilities is activated abilities. These are abilities that you choose to use, usually written as cost equals effect. An example would be tap this card, add 1 mana. You pay the cost, like tapping the card or spending mana, and then the effect goes onto the stack. So now that you know the difference between static, triggered, and activated abilities, let's go over the most common keywords you'll actually see in games. Things like flying, trample, or lifelink. First up, we're going to talk about flying. Flying creatures can only be blocked by other creatures with flying or reach. And that leads me into what reach is. Reach is what lets ground creatures block flyers. Next on our list of abilities is menace. A creature with menace can't be blocked by except 2 or more creatures. That means if you attack with a creature that has menace, only 2 creatures can block it, no less. Now let's talk about trample. If a trampling creature deals more damage than it needs to kill a blocker, the rest rolls over to the defending player or planeswalker. For example, if a player declares an attacker that has trample, it's a 10-10, right? And I block it with a 1-1. The remaining 9 damage after it attacks that one blocker will roll over into me in my life total. Now let's talk about first strike and double strike. First strike means your creature deals combat damage before creatures without it. Double strike means it deals damage during first strike and regular combat. An example of first strike would be, let's say I have a 2/2 creature with first strike, and it's being blocked with a 2/2 without first strike. In the first strike step, my creature deals 2 damage first, destroying their 2/2. Since their creature is already gone, it never gets the chance to deal damage back. My 2/2 survives, and we move on. Now double strike, let's put that same scenario, except my creature that has a 2/2 with double strike is being blocked by 4/4 without it. In the first strike step, my 2/2 deals 2 damage to that 4/4, but the 4/4 is still alive with 2 toughness left. Then, in the regular combat step, my 2/2 deals another 2 damage. That's enough to finish off the 4/4, but at the same time, the 4/4 deals us 4 damage back during the normal step, which kills my 2/2 creature. So both creatures end up in the graveyard, but my little 2/2 traded up into a much bigger creature thanks to double strike. The next ability we're going to talk about is going to be lifelink. Lifelink means whenever this creature deals damage, you gain that much life. An example would be if a 3/3 with lifelink hits a player or a creature, you gain 3 life. Next up, we have poison. Instead of dealing regular damage, some creatures give players poison counters. If you ever get 10 poison counters, you lose the game. For an example, if a creature with Toxic 1 hits you twice, you'll have 2 poison counters. At 10, game over, even if your life total is 100,000. Next on the list, we have haste, which I mentioned earlier. Normally, creatures can't attack or tap for abilities the turn they enter. That's called summoning sickness. Haste ignores that rule. For example, a 2/2 with haste can swing right away as long as it's cast in your first main phase. Now let's lean into more protection and staying power abilities. First up, we have hexproof. Your opponents can't target this creature with spells or abilities. Example, if I control a 3/3 with hexproof, your opponent can't cast shock or pacifism on it, but you can still enchant it or buff it yourself. Now let's talk about shroud. A shroud means no one can target this creature, not even you. An example would be a creature with shroud can't be hit by your opponent's removal, but you also can't cast a pump spell like giant growth on it. It is untouchable by anyone. Last up, we have indestructible. Indestructible means this permanent can't be destroyed by damage or effects that say destroy. It can still be exiled, bounced, or sacrificed. An example would be a 5/5 indestructible takes lethal damage, or is hit with destroy target creature. It will still stay on the battlefield, but if opponent plays exile target creature, it's still gone. Abilities like these can completely change the flow of a game. Between combat tricks, life gain, and ways to protect your creatures, abilities are what make Magic so dynamic. Okay, so we've talked about abilities, now let's talk about how the game keeps track of them. Magic uses counters for that. There are little markers that show changes or progress. They can go on cards or even players. Some of the big ones you will encounter normally will be +1/+1 and -1/-1 counters. These change a creature's power and toughness permanently unless removed. For example, a 2/2 with 2 +1/+1 counters becomes a 4/4. The next type of counter that we're going to cover is going to be loyalty counters. Planeswalkers use loyalty counters to track their abilities. Add or remove them when you activate one each turn. The last big one we're going to talk about will be poison counters. This is a type of counter that goes on a player. So if a player gets poison counters, nothing else big happens, but whenever a player reaches 10, they will lose the game. There are also tons of other counters in Magic like shield, energy, or lore counters, and new sets often add more, so don't worry too much about memorizing them, just remember they're a way for the game to keep track of effects. So counters help the game keep track of all kinds of effects, but what about the end of the game itself? Let's talk about the ways you can actually win or lose in Magic. The most common way is life total. If you reduce your opponent's life total to 0, you win. In Commander, since players start at 40 life, it just takes a bit longer to bring them down to 0. One way you can lose the game is drawing from an empty library. If you ever need to draw a card and your library is empty, you would lose the game. The last way I'm going to mention how to lose will be poison counters. Now you've heard me talk about these a lot in the past, so I'm going to dive into it. Players can also lose if they collect 10 poison counters. Creatures with abilities like Infect or Toxic deal poison counters on top of their normal damage. For more Commander specific, there's something called Commander damage. In Commander, there's one more special rule. If you take 21 combat damage from the same commander, you lose, even if your life total is still high. Some cards bend the rules and say things like, if you meet this condition, you win the game. They're rare, but they do exist, and they make Magic even crazier. We call those alternate win cons. Some examples would be Revel in Riches. Revel in Riches give you treasure tokens whenever an opponent's creatures die, and if you start your turn with 10 treasure tokens, you would automatically win the game. Another example would be Approach of the Second Sun. When you cast it the first time, it tucks itself back into your deck, and if you cast it a second time, you automatically win. These kinds of cards are rare, but they're a great example of how Magic sometimes lets you win in ways that aren't just about life totals or combat damage. So those are the main ways a game can end. But not every game of Magic is played the same way. Let's take a quick look at the most popular formats you'll see at your local game store. First off was Standard. Standard is Magic's rotating format. It uses cards from the most recent sets, usually the last 2 years or so. Because old sets rotate out, the format always stays fresh and balanced. It's great if you want to play competitively or keep up with the newest strategies. The next format I'm going to talk about is going to be our Draft/Limited. Limited formats like Draft or Sealed are all about building a deck on the spot. In Draft, You sit with other players, open booster packs, and pick cards one at a time to build your deck. In Sealed, you just get a set number of packs and make a deck from what you open. These formats are great for players who like creativity and improvisation, since everyone builds from the same limited card pool. The next format we're going to cover is Commander. Commander is one of the most popular casual formats out there, and it's actually what got me into Magic. In Commander, you play a deck with 100 cards, and you only have one of each card except basic lands. Your deck is built around a Commander, a legendary creature that starts in the command zone and can be passed over and over again. Everyone starts at 40 life, and games are usually multiplayer free-for-alls with 3 to 5 players. Commander is all about big plays, table politics, and creativity. A couple of honorable mention for formats that I don't see anymore is Modern, a non-rotating format that allows cards going back many years, making it more powerful but also more expensive. Pioneer, a newer non-rotating format that starts with sets from 2012 onward, cheaper and easier to get into than Modern. And the last two I'll cover will be Legacy/Vintage. These formats allow almost every card ever printed. They're powerful, but usually only played by hardcore veterans. So whether you want to keep up with the newest competitive scene, build a deck around your favorite commander, or just crack packs and draft with friends, there's a format that fits everyone's style. Alright, that's the basics of how to play Magic the Gathering. We've covered the board, the cards, abilities, and ways you can win or lose. In the next video, we'll dive into deck building, and even play through a sample game so you can all see it in action. And if you want to be a part of the channel, I've set up a Google form where you can submit your own decks. I'll be reviewing some of them right here in future videos. So if you'd like feedback or just want to see your deck featured, go drop it in. If this helped you, hit that subscribe button so you don't miss the next part of the series. And if you've got questions about rules or formats, drop them in the comments. I might cover them in upcoming shorts or videos. Also, huge thank you to all of you helping the channel hit 200 subscribers recently. That's a big step for me, and I couldn't have done it without your support. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.